And he is going to have to deal with potential trickery and stuff that I know Zoun is absolutely capable of. And that is the one kind of way that we do sometimes see someone like Serral actually falter, especially when you think about group stages for European regions or things like that, where he'll fall to Gerald or something 2-0. It's in those kind of weird, either aggressive builds or actually sometimes funky, like fast techs up to Sky Toss or things along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, Serral has been thrown off by a couple of tricky builds. One of the more recent matches that he played against I suppose, easy opponent was versus Geralt. All right, so I know they were talking about the recent Champions Cup where he lost against Superdos as well, but Geralt was the bigger surprise in regionals. And if you actually watch those games, they weren't necessarily all that tricky. There might have been some like minor tricks, right, to kind of throw Serral off, but it wasn't like a surprise, I have 12 Zealots in your base. So, I mean, he has also faltered a little bit more, I guess, in terms of that macro ZVP, as we did go through a bit of a transitional phase where, the meta became something different. But we're still talking about Serral faltering, which means not, he's lost 6 games out of 12, he's lost 1 out of 12.
Yeah, it's like, wow, Serral dropped a map. He dropped a series after he already topped the group. I think it is definitely a testament to how strong of a player Serral is and how consistent he is. And I really agree with what Loco was saying earlier. Serral at an offline LAN also is a different beast.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we expect him to actually win this tournament. I believe as far as the non-GSL global events, he is the most winningest player, which is always my favorite phrase. But yeah, he's won a ton, and the only reason that he wasn't in contention for Valencia, the only other DreamHack this year, was because he didn't go. Just stuff happening IRL, right? He decided to take a little bit of a break, but he was right back at it at TSL and won that pretty convincingly versus Maru. So he comes in as a favorite alongside Maru. Right?
Yeah, I think everyone would pretty much agree with that. Now, Zoun, he is one of those players, like you were saying, that was popping off a little bit ago, and more recently hasn't quite been getting this as big of the results as he was, say, like 6 months to a year ago. But I think if he's able to take this series versus Serral, that is immediately just putting him back on the map as one of the top contenders and one of the top players out there. But we'll see what he's going to be busting out. So far, it is going to be a pretty typical looking opening. Sends out the Adept for the Scout and also starts up that first Oracle.
Yeah. I think the first thing that we're really going to be paying attention to is going to be basically what he does with the Twilight Council, I would expect. I don't think he's going to go into Robo from here. Is Zoun going to do some non-Stargate openers in this best of 5? I do believe so, but with the Stargate opener here, especially as an Oracle, so it's really nothing funky. It's more like, okay, Twilight Council, is it going to be blank? Is it going to be that charge? But yeah, you said it. If Zoun were to win here, I mean, that would be one of the highlights of his career, really. I know he's done well in other tournaments, but that would be pretty freaking big. But it would once again cement him as that player to look out for, which has been lost a little bit more, I think. So, like I said, it's been like he climbed a mountain and then he had to come back down. He has to climb the mountain a little bit again. But it is maybe possible. He's got that victory versus Bjorn under his belt to give him that confidence boost. And he does seem like he is in a good headspace, and the pressure's not really getting to him about being at this offline tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's gotten a good amount of experience at a bunch of these offline events, especially over the last couple of years. And it is just going to be about putting it all into practice. Now, we are going to see already a second Oracle making its way forward. First Oracle not able to do a whole lot of damage just yet, but there's that Twilight Council you were talking about, Zombie Grub. And Data C, it's a big map. There's definitely some potential for doing a little bits of forms of harassment here and there, but it is a map that tends to lend itself toward macro games in the long term.
Really? Data C?
Data C, yeah, just a little bit.
Have we seen any of those this weekend?
I don't know. Depends. Did you happen to catch, the stream, like, I don't know, when it was going for maybe a 50-minute or 60-minute game or so? Maybe once or twice or 3 times?
Yeah, maybe quite a few. And that's not, that's not even really tracking the just sheer amount of games that have been broadcast and then also played beyond the broadcast. I'm sure it's actually given us probably the most long macro games. It's also been giving us the most games. It has firmly cemented itself as the favorite map, and like every matchup comes out first, which I do not believe was the case. I feel like we did have a bit more variety at our previous events, and then now it's just Data C all the time.
I think that might just be a little bit of a symptom of, as the maps have been around longer and longer, players figure out more and more, yeah, these are the maps that actually I really feel confident about. Maybe it was a little bit more up in the air when the map pool was fresher, but yeah. Players are feeling pretty comfortable about their knowledge of how these maps are going to favor particular races.
Well, we have the setup basically at this point, guys. Otherwise, very small attempts at poking and prodding from really either side. Oracles have a little bit more potential than the amount of Lings that Serral built in the early game, but they haven't done very much, and Serral didn't build that many Lings in the early game. So only now does he have anything really out in the field that could, even threaten a couple of probes. But it is going to be charge from Zoun going into those Archons, and then Serral did opt for the fast +1 melee, which we know does get that +2 melee, which becomes very devastating in terms of harassment. That +2, singling out those probes, is going to be a big part of this. We are going to opt for the Spire option this play, because we do want to kind of just wait for that to finish before we start calling mass muta or only 8 mutas, or honestly no mutas at all.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an important thing to look out for once that Spire finishes on up. On Zoun's side of the field, he really is just getting up into that I have all of my power units coming out pretty quickly sort of style of Protoss, where he's not putting on that much pressure outside of just these light little Oracle pokes forward. He's getting Revelations off, but he's leaving Serral alone to do what he wants, while he also gets to do everything he wants. As we already see, the Temple Archives finished up and Archon's already starting to be made, Robotics Bay is also finishing up on top of that.
Notably not a structure that gives you anything that shoots up, so that's a bit problematic. The Spire placement is pretty much perfect. No, not quite. And really, kudos on Zoun for being so stubborn about checking. A lot of Protoss sometimes are completely denied from the natural entirely. They kind of check it, but then they don't really get the full vision. They go, okay, close enough, and nips them in the butt. And then they very rarely get to that particular section. So for Zoun to go even beyond, very intent on finding that Spire. But here's the thing, Serral, realizing that was in fact scouted, has options. He could not, he could go for a lot, he could go for a little, and he's going to go for at least 10 right now. It's going to open up opportunities as far as the rest of his army as well. You swoop into the main or the natural, whatever you want, you go somewhere else with the main army, and you're basically hoping that Zoun messes up severely in every single place, but at least in one place.
And it's also worth mentioning that while there was that first Phoenix and even a second Phoenix, I believe, made, we aren't seeing any more really being added on. And 2 Phoenix is not exactly the ideal number against that number of mutas. So he's going to be relying a bit on some of the Stalker DPS. He's going to be relying a bit on the Archons to sort of buy a little bit of time against just the initial wave of these mutas. And we'll see if these mutas actually try and pair together with the army and really distract Zoun a bit. But the muta count in terms of the number has been revealed. We already see Phoenix production immediately resumes 2 at a time.
Right. I think that Zoun is responding so far quite perfectly. You still have to divvy up your army, which is still kind of small overall as the Protoss player, right? You have to divvy it up very well, but that is where SimCity and shield batteries and static defense are just key to it, right? They're going to cover any supply deficit you might have, which honestly 20 as the Protoss player being behind 20s is really not that bad. It is just a matter of having the right units in the right place. I hesitate to say that Serral is going to get anything done, and I'm going to double down on that because those were 2 fantastic disruptor shots.
It just takes a moment, a few seconds for something like that to happen. That is a big victory there for Zoun. He cleans up quite a few of those Lings over there. And also has a fair number of these Phoenix around to actually push back these mutas. The mutas is already committing pretty far in. And that means that these Phoenix get free reign to pick off a handful of them. Already we're seeing that these mutas have not really gotten the value that I think Serral was looking for with them.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because the only thing you can argue really at this point, there was really no distraction, there was no real economic losses. Him having to make a lot of stacked defense does not count as he is comfortably on 4 bases. The only thing you can say is that he had to make Phoenix. But like we're pretty much heading to a game where having 2 Stargates is already pretty nice anyways, because you are on 4 bases, you do have a lot of economy, not much has happened, so we are increasing the likelihood of getting into a super late game ZVP. Serral absolutely still wants to go for a couple of punches before admitting that defeat though, and he's going to try right now, but I don't know, this already is starting off with a couple more disruptor shots.
Yeah, disruptor shots not hitting a ton of units, but just look at how many Archons there are. The Banelings look at that Archon wall and say, yeah, I think I'm going to pass on this. A lot of these units also trapped in those stasis traps, and this just makes things even more awkward on the retreat. Now you kind of feel like you're forced to fight against a bunch of these units. One of the Archons does end up popping over there, but the disruptors come in to reinforce, and Serral just has to back off.
I actually would say that if it wasn't Serral, I would just kind of be calling it now for the Protoss. The Protoss would win this one. They've gotten over the hump that is usually the hardest part about this type of matchup and this type of game, which is getting to a decent number of Archons and a decent supply. and Zoun's got there. Serral has really not phased this guy, and now he is doing, I think, the very appropriate thing, pushing into Serral. The Banelings trying to get some good connections, do hit basically the heart of the Protoss army, so making their splash as effective as possible and actually taking down the Archons as well. That was a hold, but their supplies are still uncomfortably even for a Zerg, who is not yet on Greater Spire. That is in the works, however.
I think that is going to be the scary thing here for Serral. I will say a bit of an overcommitment there from Zoun, especially since he didn't really have a War Prism or anything. There was no ability to reinforce, no ability to pick up some of those softened up Archons on the front lines, but he did still trade out versus quite a few of those Zerg units. Serral is going to start climbing a bit further in supply as he adds on those Corruptors, because that Greater Spire is about halfway done. That is going to be a pivotal moment here, but like you were saying earlier, ZombieGrub, 2 Stargates already done means that Zoun is a lot better prepared to at least respond a bit to this.
You know, Zoun did, while he did the attack, really opt to go into that late game carrier,
Those
right?
resources lost.
Like, I feel like if he had purely tried to remax on Ground Army, and a lot of Zealots, yes, but, you know, he had 3,000 in the bank, that still could overwhelm even someone with Banelings. He might have been able to really capture that moment and carry on with momentum. As it is, Serral is going to get to those Broodlords. And while Zoun is also getting to a response to the Broodlords, you gotta wonder if this is still ultimately playing into Serral's hand, which is his extremely good late game. I feel like there was an opening, and now it's just less of an opening, but let's see if Zoun can carry on through 5 bases. Blink is on the way, so he built 2 carriers and then stopped?
Yeah,
okay,
2 or 3 carriers I think were on the way, and as he has a
he
third
canceled
Stargate now, yeah.
Okay.
So it's gonna be a bit of firepower there, and we are, actually wait, I may have misseen. Did we even have a carrier pop out?
No, he canceled them.
Ah,
Yeah, okay. So that was kind of what we missed. So he did opt to go a bit more into that ground, especially with the upgrades, but of course still keeping in mind that Broodlords will probably be in play. Okay, all right, yeah, I think this is still, you know, anyone's game, right? But Serral didn't really get a lot done in the mid game, now is playing that extreme late game, and that's where we're going to be at now, guys. So settle in, ZVP in the late game on Data C. Get excited.
Go figure, Data C gonna go to that hyper late macro game, as both these players seem like they already knew it was gonna head in this direction from the very beginning with some of the game playing decision making for the early game. But I like the little moves over here from Zoun. He already has that War Prism getting in position, potentially warp in, decides to back off for the moment, maybe gonna try and time this out as his army moves out onto the map and force Serral to move forward with a bunch of his units first. We already also see some Infestors coming on out, but oh man, War Prism did get spotted. Serral does not miss anything. He is going to be able to take that out. That's actually a really big victory to be able to shut down the potential of Zealot Warpins in his main.
Yeah, it goes back to kind of a one-dimensional army fight, which is like, if I'm in place for your placement of army, then I'm probably okay, which is currently the case. Serral going to be trying to build up a bit of a bank. I mean, both of them really are, but Zoun's still in this army. We'll eventually maybe want to start trading it out for even more capital ships. They're kind of halfsies currently. Well, I guess really both. Serral only has a couple of Broodlords, but that will change. He is absolutely prepping for the late game, as is Zoun. Both of them getting that really high tech that you kind of see only in those super late games. But first, wanted to get something done with the mid-tech units. Lots of Banelings rolling on through there, something that Zoun didn't really seem to have any idea about. So it's going to be a couple of freebie kills. Really not all that much, though, and this is kind of expensive, right? Like, if Zoun is okay with this, you don't want to use all those Banelings for it.
Yeah, it doesn't actually end up killing the base. Yeah, a handful of probes go down, but really, it's not even that necessarily that important of a base. It's pretty easy to resaturate the gas geysers, which is going to be the main thing I think Zoun wants to build up a little bit more of his gas bank on. But he also manages to finish up storm research during all of that, as it wasn't quite finished in time if he was trying to do some kind of engagement right before that. So I think Zoun's going to be more than okay with how things traded out at the beginning there.
Yeah. I mean, this is pretty nice to set up yourself into the late game. Zoun has a bigger bank.
Yeah.
And it's very nice to have against a Zerg player.
I think we saw the resources lost a little bit earlier because our wonderful observer is showing us. And yeah, it still is going to be favoring Zoun. Not as much as it was earlier, but still a solid and important thing to be favored in those resources lost as we head into these kind of stalemate split map macro games.
Which, yeah, we did get into. I didn't notice. I thought Serral already had pathogen glands, but when I referred to that really high technology that's only found in late game, I was talking about the Tempest upgrade.
Yeah.
Sonic Disabulation. Did I get that right? And then the Neural Parasite. But that's happened before Fungal, or the extra energy for the Infestors. Not that it really matters. I think he might have time either way, but Zoun is coming to push right now, so if his Infestors haven't been made for a while, Let's check them. 5 infestors have been made for a while, so no big problem.
All right, Phoenix is going to try and use a bit of this energy that they've just kind of been banking up to pick off a handful of drones. I think at this point, it is really just a kind of sacrificial play. Take the Phoenix out, free up some supply for some other units, which it looks like it is going to be 3 carriers on the way. A Dark Shrine also on the way, just rounding out all of that tech. But I like this a little bit for Serral. It's a lot lighter on the banelings compared to the attack from earlier. I think that's going to be for the better. Even forces out a recall from a bunch of units. It can maybe hit from the south side at the same time. No, doesn't actually have anything getting set up there.
No, not so much. Well, it's whatever it is being set up is going to take a little while, right?
Yeah.
Broodlord Infestor, still ultimately a slow-moving composition. It's down. I mean, it is kind of out of place. If the Broodlords had been a little bit faster, they probably could have gone for the bottom right base, gotten at least a cancel. Not that that amounts to a super big deal yet, but it does look like Serral's kind of chosen to, where to fight. He's going to keep his slow army in the bottom right and push Zoun there. And now Zoun has to actually draw the line in the sand as well with his Tempest and Carriers, which he's come to do exactly that. So we'll see if anyone pulls the trigger.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning as we have another attack on that north side yet again here for Serral. Maybe just trying to draw more of the units for Zoun over to the north side, especially since he knows Recall's probably going to be on cooldown, and that means that there's not really a great response to this. I don't think it's going to be so much about the probes killed over here. It's going to be just forcing Warpins on the north side and also just causing a bit of chaos and preventing Zoun from focusing on the south. That is a fascinating Overlord rally, and it looks like Serral agrees.
There's no way that's a rally of like fresh Overlords, right? That's way too many. I don't know what they're doing over there. But I thought maybe they'd turn into Overlord drops and then scare the guy. That would be kind of funny. But not actually going to be the case. We do have a battle happening in the bottom right. A couple of those disruptors are going to get taken out. I don't know if they really can shoot it all that much to the ground. But it looks like Zoun is going to be forcing Serral back. And Serral does need to worry about the amount of bases that he's going to be able to settle on, right? Like if you have to settle on 4 bases, that's going to feel terrible, especially since so many of them are your original base.
Yeah, I do want to credit Serral to having kept his Infestors alive against those Disruptor hits, as I think that's a lot of what they were trying to hope to try and get. Managed to keep them alive, which means those Neural Parasites going to be a little bit scary, as well as even just the Fungals for locking down this army, preventing it from running quite as easily. Little Roach counter harassment is, again, it's just these little annoyances that are going to annoy Zoun and cause him to focus on the north side of the map, where he really, really wants to make sure he is taking a positive trade on the south side.
Well, seems to be doing a good job. I mean, he's reading the situation of his entire almost 19-minute ZVP, I would say very well. There are a few mistakes. I guess hindsight, overly eager with that push into Serral's 4th base, but I think it made sense at the time, and clearly adapted out of it totally fine. So Zoun is the one settled here on a good number of bases. He has been denying Serral's bases as well, but it's also one of those games where I'm not sure how much these relatively tiny things are going to matter if we get to 30, 35, 40 minutes, right? There's still a long road ahead of us for both these players, especially.
I will say, I really do like that Zoun was focusing on taking more of the bottom right-hand bases. It might almost seem like a little bit counterintuitive because so many of his fresher bases are on the north side of the map, but his entire army, his main force was on the south side being aggressive. So he's been covering his bottom right-hand side, but the Ultras come forward. He forces a recall out. At least 1 or 2 of the carriers are going to end up falling over there during the recall thanks to that massive number of Corruptors. And that is going to be a little pickup there for Serral, but he's also going to end up losing a hatchery on the north left-hand side. These Broodlords are really well positioned though, and this army, it's an expensive army to be losing. Yeah,
Zoun kind of taking 2 punches to the guts. That wasn't a particularly good minute there for him. At least he gets some DTs in to get another base to the top left and do some harassment elsewhere. But yeah, that was definitely a moment there for Zoun where he had to just kind of admit defeat quickly and then get the heck out of there. I think primarily having those High Templars so unguarded to the Ultras that he either wasn't expecting or that many of them was really the main problem. Certainly wasn't in control of that engagement. He wasn't the initiator there, which you would kind of prefer to be. So get the heck out of there, adapt, fill out your composition, and try again a little bit later.
Yeah, what I think has been really interesting about this game is that Zoun is not just doing the passive Protoss style where he sits back on his shield batteries, tries to take new bases and everything. He is continuing to pressure Serral, and because of that, we haven't really seen the massive static defense setup that a lot of Zerg players like to go for. Yeah, Serral does have like our 2K mineral bank, but we don't really see 15, 20 Spore Crawlers joining his army with a lot of these fights. They're knocking out Interceptors, making the trades a little bit harder for Zoun. Zoun is continuing to find opportunities to trade against Serral and kind of keeping both of their banks a little bit lighter.
That's true. There's no extreme bank, although Serral with the recent victory, I'd say, in that fight is starting to build, a little bit more of one. And really, earlier on, the resources loss difference was quite nice. Now, I would say a lot of Protoss players wish there was a lot more, like a 5 or even 10K resource difference where they're like, yeah, I'm doing good. 3K is kind of even concerning sometimes. Again, not that we're really all that concerned here. Yes, as seen in the previous fight, sometimes all it takes is one person not paying attention or just having the wrong order of army in a certain place to suddenly end this game. But if we believe what we've seen for 22 minutes, which is both players really sizing each other up very well, that's not going to happen until much later on, when someone maybe even gets impatient.
Yeah, I think that is definitely going to be the case with players of these calibers. It's unlikely that they're suddenly just going to find themselves in a oops, didn't mean to do that kind of situation. I do find it kind of funny that we are now heading into 22 minutes, and finally Serral is starting to round out his 3-3 upgrades on a bunch of these other kinds of units, as he is going to be up against the 3-3-3 upgrades very shortly of Zoun on both air and also ground. So rounding out all of those final upgrades for this hyper late game army situation. And also, I'm very, very curious who's going to be taking kind of the top left and bottom right-hand bases. Yeah. Who's going to be able to securely mine for those, because I think those become very pivotal in these kind of situations.
Yeah, oftentimes, right, that's what it comes down to, who can take that base. We are talking about one of the longest ways of playing out a StarCraft 2 game. As Serral right now does have that upgrade lead in the skies, but I do think it's just going to really come down more to initiation type, like who is in control of how they initiate, who has the High Templars in position versus the Fungals. Well, in this case, that did not turn out very well for Zoun. And then that would matter a little bit more than an upgrade or two of difference. Ultras on the south side, going to take the opportunity to kill a Nexus, I believe. DT is going to try, but there's Overseers.
Yeah, I think that's, I love when Zerg players include those Overseers with those kind of run-bys. So attentive to make sure that the DT Warpig can't just handle some of those Ultras very quickly. So Serral going to be able to get some good damage done there, as he is getting pushed back on the top left. He did end up losing one hatchery, but he's getting a Nexus in exchange for it.
And next, now the question is Serral retreating because he really cannot take a fight, or he's sizing up for the best fight possible, right? If he can't take a fight, then this is worrying. This is Zoun suddenly into his third base and into his natural and into his main. If it's just because he is preparing, well, we know that this could still go Serral's way, and it looks like he was just preparing for a bit of a better fight. And now looking for some of those key Fungals to actually win it, and certainly getting those chain Fungals as well. And this is the most important battle. Zoun actually going to stick around. All the High Templars once again going to be taken out of the equation. It usually is the get out of dodge button here, but no. Zoun is going to commit to the fight.
That is kind of surprising, because now that means the Corruptors can jump in on this army unabated, not worried about storms at all. We're starting to see the Corruptors going after these carriers. Mothership managing to stay alive during all this. Neural Parasites also coming out, and we see that even though the supplies are relatively even, Serral is creeping further and further ahead the longer this fight goes on.
I'm so surprised he stuck around after High Templars. Now, without having too many storms, the supply isn't as bad as it really could have been, but yeah, I thought he was going to use a recall. I even double-checked to see, make sure that he actually had one, and he did. But something about that fight said, no, I can kind of stand my ground a little bit more, and he was kind of right. We have certainly seen worse disasters on the Protoss side when they do that, and suddenly it's an 80 supply difference, no way they're coming back. Now it's only a 20 supply difference, and Zoun is still mining comfortably, so, actually checking the resources lost, we're still within that 2,000 range, I feel like that we were at earlier.
And both these players have expended a majority of their bank. Zoun is the faster one to remax with a bunch of these gateway units flooding on out. So he's able to snipe off a hatchery in the top left at the high yield gas base. Also gets a lot of drone damage down to the top left-hand base, which I don't think those drones are going to be hard for Serral to replace, but it is going to delay the mining, and that is still going to be quite annoying for him.
All right. Still not going to get that one punch to end the game. We're just going to keep on going.
It's actually pretty rare that we see a situation like that where the Protoss player commits that hard into a fight that kind of starts off so wonky, and it still ends up just being an evenish trade.
Yeah, or just in general where they both commit and it's not just over.
Yeah.
Usually their committal is kind of the final word, unless it's a really weird circumstance, which in this case it kind of was. Still very much something Zoun could come a little bit back from if that even really was the case. I guess if Serral could have gone across the map immediately, that would have been dangerous. But again, such a slow-moving army, not actually possible. So we have them once again settle on their bases, and Serral is now the one a bit lower on that bank. They're targeting a fresher base, I guess, of Zoun. It's going to go down.
Yeah, it is worth mentioning that while Serral did remax on Broodlords, Infestors, Corruptors, Vipers, Zoun did make a lot of Stalkers on that reinforcing path, and he is going to be losing and bleeding out a few of these, but that was a lot of gas he actually spent from his bank on Stalkers, and these are not necessarily the units that you want when you're fully maxed out. I think it's okay for now as you're starting to get to that max out point, but he needs to find a cost-efficient way to start trading those out.
I think he went up to maybe, I checked it was 11, so I don't know if it was any much higher than that, so that's not too bad, but you're right, that was filling some of that supply, making a little bit better, and you would really want to be using them kind of as mobility, finding something before they die, and that didn't really happen here. But now he's filling out the rest of his army with what we'd expect, those bigger and better units, and we go back to a bit of a deja vu here as the Ultras kill the bottom right base. Nope, not going to commit fully.
Oh, gonna end up probably losing an Ultra too. Maybe if they stop running them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then all of them will die.
That Ultra speed upgrade again because it's saving their bacon though. And we'll see that Zoun managed to get in the 1-2 punch there with the Zealot run by on the top left. Serral, in the meanwhile, fires back with just a handful of Broodlords sniping off one of those Nexus. These bottom right and top left-hand bases are so difficult for either one of these players to mine for a long time, but I have to actually commend Zoun, because I don't actually think we've seen too many real substantial attacks on the far bottom right-hand base. Zoun has been able to mine from that base pretty much unabated.
Right, yeah. Looking at the overall stat, like the numbers here, and Serral is already at a rather low drone count, so that's obviously giving him a better army. But then he doesn't have that big bank, right? Like if he was on 8K, we're like, yeah, of course, get rid of all, whatever. But this is kind of turning it into the one punch and win or not, even though we're not completely mined out of Data C. Obviously, it's 28 minutes, we're getting there, but it's really not completely mined out, so it's pretty early part to go ahead and do that. I'm only bringing that up as in, like, is there a world where another battle, like the one we just saw, where it was actually kind of close, can happen, and Zoun is the one that remaxes?
No, I think that's entirely fair. And what also scares me a little bit for both of these players is that it might not be the entire map mining out, but it might be that all of the reasonable to defend bases are mined out. And while there are minerals still left on the map, it is going to be the extremely exposed and difficult to keep up bases that are left. And neither one of the players can really get up the mining that they need.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Serral, I think actually a couple of different Zergs, a few games have kind of done something similar where they basically said, no, I'm not going to try and take the entire map and get away with it as long as possible. We're going to focus in a little bit more, 1 or 2 bases, and try and play it out that way. So I don't expect to have a huge bank, but I do expect some very cost-efficient trades with the army, which, I mean, so far for ZVP absolutely is happening. Again, now even on resources lost as we see this engagement kind of happen here. Probes are pulled away, though.
A lot of probes evacuating out of that location, but Serral does not get the kill on the Nexus, so they will be able to start mining again eventually, but another investment into some static defense is going to have to come up over here where you see a couple of pylons getting started, leaving some of the army there in the bottom right-hand side. Serral once again tries to reestablish some of those top left-hand bases. These players have just been so close with both the offense and defense. A complete mirror with the bottom right and the top left.
I do wonder about this engagement. I mean, Zoun's absolutely in it, and he has been mining a lot, but has he actually taken a fight? Like where he won? 100% in the last 20 minutes.
I don't think he's taking a fight against the entire army of Serral. That is something that is a little bit scary to think about, is that whenever he has been taking fights and he looks dominant, it's because maybe half of the army for Serral is there.
Right.
And he's oftentimes getting wins. I will say part of it is to Serral's credit, because I think he immediately disengages when he sees that it looks like it might be a fight that he's not going to win. And Serral just immediately gives up bases and says, okay, I'm going to do the mature thing. I'm going to give this up and, you know, live to fight another day.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what he's doing. Well, Zoun is not going to play a shy Protoss and say, oh, thank God you let me live, dear gracious Serral. He is going to try and at least make sure that if he's not necessarily going to be guaranteed a battle win, one major battle, okay, let's go, he is going to be guaranteed, again, maybe that remax over what Serral has. Although Serral, with the lack of really trades recently, is also requiring a bit of that bank. Not if Zoun actually takes the top left, however. These are the last bases for Serral's mining, and the very important Rich Vespi and Geyser as well as over here. Zoun, super comfortable. Actually, nothing bothering him on his bottom right side.
Yeah, this is one of the few times that Zoun has been attacking the top left, and Serral is not sending a force of counterattack in the bottom right. In fact, I see a wave of blue actually moving in from almost behind this army. Big Fungals actually catch quite a few of the Void Rays as well. Now, Zoun is going to try and escape back, but is going to be losing a handful of more of these air units.
I wonder if he's trying to get the High Templars when they pull back, but he has yet to use that army that you noted is looking for almost a surround. I actually don't know if Serral has it hotkeyed right now. Currently, he's just trying to make sure he's able to escape and take down some units with him. Now he brings them forward, so no surround whatsoever. Some of those High Templars are still alive, and Zoun does successfully push Serral off of a very important mining base. This is going down to literally 2 bases mining for Serral, if that, on 24 drones.
Yeah, and getting a lot of the feedbacks off means that those inners, or those, the infestors are not going to necessarily have those fungal growths that they're looking for to get those additional pickoffs. There are still a few fungal growths left over, but here we go. Moving deep in onto creep. Zoun is going to get caught by massive fungals. Archon's going to be trying to hold the line alongside those Immortals against the Ultras. We see that the Corruptor is getting completely obscured as we see the Skytoss army reign supreme. Zoun takes the first game against Serral.
Yeah, and you know, you're kind of waiting for that moment for either, depending on your point of view, Zerg or Serral to just say, you know what, no, I'm actually going to win the engagement. And then he wins, and you're like, oh, we gave Zoun too much credit on some of this stuff, and oh, well, I guess better luck next time. But really, everything we can look at now is the 32-minute game is over. Zoun was in control of that for like 80%. Like, it actually was a point where you were supposed to be far more worried for the Zerg player, but we gave a lot of credit to the idea of late game ZVP, a lot of credit to the idea of Serral's late game ZVP. But Zoun, I mean, I don't know if I'll say it's better. Give me another one of those, and then I'll say it's better. But it was certainly not the game I expected to have happen once Serral was kind of allowed to adapt to a late game ZVP.
Yeah, I think toward the end of this, we see over here as we get the fantastic replay, even a little bit slow motion. It looked a little bit scary here for Zoun in some situations where you'd see, oh man, the Corruptor's just diving in on top of everything. This is when all those High Templars were pretty much gone. There was no storms available. And this is that kind of scary moment where it looked like, oh man, Serral kind of cleaning up over here. And it seems like maybe Serral was just going to be able to dominate these late game engagements for a lot of this game.
Yeah, but now you can see with the slow-mo and second look that really it was too many Ultras. They had nothing to do after the fight, after the High Templars taken down, so the Corruptors really weren't shutting down literally everything immediately on the Skytoss side of things.
This is what I wanted to see again. Big fungals and everything, but you see the storms, oh god, carpeting all of the Corruptors at the very beginning, and a lot of the Corruptors you actually saw coming in when almost half of the Corruptors were nearly dead. It was a little bit rough there.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Wow, all right then. Serral might, I think, usually feel very good about a game like that, but might actually now be saying, you know what, Data C, first game, whatever, man, like it's over. It's done. Let's go on inside and out and play, honestly, a bit of a different game. Because even though he did try that mid-game aggression, didn't work out, I do think that is also sometimes a little bit, you can blame the map a little bit. Inside out being a bit smaller, we might see that type of aggression actually work. Maybe the Muta Gambit also is just not chosen to do, and that also opens up other things, other builds from the Zerg player. But we're spawning down here in the bottom left as opposed underdog, up 1-0. He is the Red Protoss, Zoun.
And up here in the top right-hand side of the map, the blue Zerg player, the champion of Europe and sometimes the world. He is NC Sports' Serral.
We're going to have those normal openers, so you want to hear some potentially useless facts.
You know I'm always ready for some useless facts to figure out.
Oh, no, I thought that was the other side of the map. Yeah, so totally normal openers. All right, Serral is one of 2 people in this tournament who have actually won a global championship for the non-GSL global events. Him and Maru are the only 2. No one else has that trophy. And then Serral also one of 2 non-Koreans to win these global championships from the inception of EPT. Can you guess the other one? Rainer.
Huh?
Rainer.
Rainer. Oh, okay. Yeah. I wasn't sure if you were including players that were at the event or not.
No, Rainer and that's true actually. So Rainer's not here, right? So Serral, absolutely deserving of at least the GOAT argument. Not that I want to incite that, but he is absolutely the favorites. He should be the favorite. There's really no overemphasizing or trying to create artificial hype that he's supposed to be winning this best of 5, winning the next best of 5, and winning the next best of 5, and then maybe at the finals. We start to worry a little bit. But instead, he is down 1-0, where it really looked like he could not do very much against Zoun in any part of the game.
I think going back to how that game was opening up is going to be something I'm really looking forward to seeing how Serral adjusts in game number 2, just because that last game, it was both players effectively consensually saying, yeah, this is Data C, we play macro here, let's both leave each other alone, 10-minute no rush effectively, except, they're pro players that are extremely good at what they do. So it ended up being like 8 or 9, 7 minutes no rush because they just get to the end game even faster than normal.
All right.
But it really was, in some ways, a kind of atypical PvZ because there was no interference with each other outside of Oracle's keeping an eye on things.
And that's really all they did, was keep an eye on things, and not extreme amount of damage done. So we did have Serral then try to turn it up to 10 and go for a lot of aggression with the mid game, which is usually a very daunting thing for Protoss to go up against really any of the good Zerg out there. But Zoun made it look a bit effortless. Zoun is going to change things up. I said I think he'd go into a Robo or Twilight Council opener aside from a Stargate one. And he has chosen for Inside and Out to go into a Robo opener. Now, this typically for him would go into that single Colossus push, and I guess he still does it. So I'm going to go ahead and say that it is that one, but we've also seen some Protoss players take it and kind of adapt it with only Disruptors, no Colossus, which if we do get there, I'll have opinions on. But right now, just focusing on the fact that it is a Robo opener, could start off with that Disruptor drop, and Serral will figure this out probably pretty soon. I mean, maybe with the first Warp Prism, so there's a chance the Disruptor gets a good shot initially, but then afterwards, I feel like it is something that Serral has played against, and he will be able to figure out some of the common branches off of this opener.
Yeah, I think if there's one thing that people usually credit Serral for, and the reason why he was such a consistent player for such a long time, is that he is usually pretty gosh darn good at getting that scouting information off. Already sending that Overlord in, but also has a lot of Lings on patrol to scout around for potential Warp Prism paths and whatnot. Adepts are going to get spotted by the Overlords as well, so he kind of has an idea of where to not send his Lings for a little bit.
Right, yeah. I mean, the Ling covering the Overlord can be really helpful. To know where the Warp Prism could be coming in from can be super, super helpful.
There you go.
And now he's going to know that, well, for now it's over here, right? But they both know where it is now. So Zoun might try to change that up. He's currently waiting on the Disruptor to actually escape from the robotics facility.
Escape, yeah. Let me out, let me out!
Is he phasing in? I don't know. It's on the gateway. Anyway, so that is what we're currently waiting on, is the Disruptor. How much damage is it going to do? How much is it going to actually control Serral? And then whether or not Zoun is looking for that immediate aggression. But we already kind of have our answer. It is actually a third Nexus. It is going to be Twilight Council and Forge. So this really is going to an opener into later aggression than the one I was kind of throwing out there, the likes of what we saw a couple of years ago, where it really was just an immediate follow-up attack. This one, a little bit slower, very much could still be Stalkers, 2 Disruptors, and a Colossus.
So with this first Disruptor coming on forward with the Prism Speed upgrades on Migra, but how much damage are you okay with versus really happy with as a Protoss player from that Disruptor?
That's a very good question. Personally, I haven't asked any of the pros what they think yet, but I would guess actually that it's, from what I've seen with this opener anyways, it's oftentimes not even about the amount of damage done. Now, if they do get 30 drones in total after 3 drops, okay, that's obviously impactful. But it is also a lot about the scouting and just kind of aggression that you put on the other players that are constantly trying to deal with you. So they're maybe making little micro mistakes in their own build, or their army's chasing somewhere instead of attacking you and bothering you, right? So it can work out in that way, almost like the indirect damage is more important than direct damage.
Yeah, I really like that as well, since Disruptors are one of the best units in all of StarCraft at forcing attention.
Yeah.
There's some units in StarCraft that are very good at making sure you have to pay attention to them. Disruptor has to be the best in StarCraft at it.
I think so, yeah. You take the worst losses if you don't, right? Yeah, because even Banelings maybe aren't as bad if you don't pay attention to them. Oh, okay, he's going to go into the double Phoenix follow-up. Wow, or double Stargate. That is a very fast double Stargate, not double Phoenix. And that, that is interesting. So he might, I don't know if you can do a little bit of kind of like fake pressure. Say like, oh yeah, I am going to try to attack into you. I am going to do this bit of a serious push, but bam, it's Stargate's behind it. Or if he really is going to play passively, I gotta assume you kind of have to apply some type of serious pressure on Serral, especially if you see him going into a hive this fast.
Yeah, I wonder if this is going to prompt any kind of reaction. He does have quite a few gateways finishing up, and of course he still has that Warp Prism, some of the Disruptors out. So with Blink and +1 weapons finishing up, is this going to be a potential timing for him to do a little bit of pressure here? Try and keep Serral a bit honest, especially if Serral going up to like Hive and the Lurker Den. I think there's got to be something you want to try and get done.
Wait, did Serral even scout the fake double Stargate? Am I correct? Are we insane?
No?
Did it happen? Okay, interesting.
You know what? I will confirm, Zombie Grub, and you are not being gaslit. You in fact did see 2 Stargates, and I know I saw that too.
Thank you. But then if you canceled them, I would have expected it's because Serral saw them. But I guess what would then be said is that he changed his mind. He is going to devote entirely on that ground aggression. So back to one of my initial guesses, I guess, the Stalker Disruptor push, no Colossus. As we watch the Disruptors get sent out first forward, we can see how impactful they absolutely can be. But without that Colossus, you're missing the coverage once you're out of those shots. And with only 3 Disruptors, it is absolutely possible for the Zerg player to count the shots, and they might try and actually pull the trigger when you're not prepared.
And you can see for exactly that reason, Zoun has fired 2 of his shots, but is holding back that 3rd one for a little bit, making sure that he has something available. Also has to be very careful. He cannot give up too much ground because he needs to also protect that War Prism that is providing those reinforcements. Viper's coming on forward, though. Abducts come on out, and 1-2, they go down. 3rd Disruptor getting a focus fire down by a handful of these roaches. It does manage to escape, but the Stalkers are getting a lot of damage done in the meanwhile. Is it enough with Blink? Can they break through?
I don't think so, man. 17 more roaches are on the way. I don't believe they've snowballed enough prior to the Disruptors really being taken out of the equation. The one last Disruptor not getting anything right there. Serral's going to have so many more options past this point than Zoun does. The supply is pretty much telling the tale, again, as the Vipers come forward, although did lose a bit more on the Roach side thanks to that. But it's still so much Zerg. And even if you took out this base, unless Serral really takes a bad Disruptor shot to the face, I think he could still survive afterwards.
It is going to be extremely tough to try and break through this. The Prism not getting out of Prism mode until the very last second. It does manage to stay alive with a single Disruptor in it, but Serral has held. That was a lot of committed aggression there for Zoun. He lost almost all of his Disruptors. He lost so much, and you can see it reflected in the supply how far behind he is.
I think, you know, he might have, I wish I had actually been paying really close attention if he canceled those because he saw the Hive and he was hoping to basically hit that pre-Hive timing. And that would be brilliant, actually. Yeah. I think Serral also had absolutely that in mind, that if I just got to the Vipers, then I'd make sure that his Disruptor follow-up wouldn't do anything. But that was the moment. The moment was there for Zoun to hit maybe slightly before the Vipers were there, so that he did enough damage that even when they did come, it still wouldn't be enough. Because that Roach number was awfully close to not quite being good enough against the Stalkers. But now that moment has passed, Zoun really dedicated quite a bit on 3 bases. And it's not like Serral was on 50 drones while getting up to that high technology. He is still plentiful on the economy, on the technology. Now he has Lurkers to use as well. Looks like he's going to dive for this Nexus and get that cancel. So Zoun is going to have to rebuild from scratch in that department. The supplies might not look that bad if you're familiar with ZVP, but that's when someone's on like pure Roach. We do have Hydras, we do have Lurkers on the way, and of course the Viper is still available.
And that's all off the back of the fact that there is Hive ready, and those Lurker upgrades are going to be finishing up anytime soon. As 1-0 seconds now finishing up. Adaptive Talons available for those Lurkers. Disruptor shots are going to need to be big. Gets a Ravager over there, that's something, but not keeping the Disruptor alive is really going to hurt here. I actually feel like more than anything else, Disruptors are going to be the kind of name of the game here for Zoun to stay alive, but it's very difficult to make that happen when you have Vipers out. I'm amazed he kept both the Prism and the Disruptor alive there, though.
Yeah, that was pretty clutch. Pretty clutch. And Zoun is still trying to, at the very least, present a front, if not straight up just take good micro battles where he is allowed to escape with enough to say, yeah, job well done. He's not playing scared, which really would have been so tempting to do against Serral, especially after some of your initial plans didn't work out, but he's trying to apply any form of pressure that he can, take a little bit of that map control before suddenly 12 lurkers just appear on his side of the map, choking him out on a 4th base, because that would probably be the end game if that happens. So he kind of needs to win some type of battle right here, right now, or here comes the lurkers, and then what do you do?
Yeah, I think that I love how Zoun is trying to take advantage of the one thing his army has, which is that it's a little bit more mobile and it can be a little bit better in scrappy fights, as we see in the picture-in-picture. Zealots and Archons chasing down a handful of these Ravagers, but eventually Serral closes the distance. He's narrowing down these Nexus one by one. He's going to start to take out this one, but what is there really for Zoun to protect his next Nexus?
I would say disruptors, but nope. No. Okay, well, I'm not going to say anything anymore because that is game. Serral takes game for himself, tying it up 1-1. It was a little bit of a windy road to get there, but we did finally arrive at the Serral victory. Zoun trying to apply some of those really cool builds that we gave him credit for in some of the pregame talk, but not really working out, not hitting the timing when it was most needed.
Yeah, exactly what you were saying. A lot of the build orders and the exact timings of things having such a massive impact in that game. Because like you were saying, if there aren't the Vipers over here for this push-in, if these two disruptors don't just immediately get abducted there, you at least see the Roaches and Ravagers having to retreat. It's not necessarily that the disruptors get massive hits, it's that they force the Roaches and Ravagers to disengage. The Stalkers move forward further, they get a better concave, they're dealing damage while not taking damage as those units are retreating. All of those little fights can look so different if those disruptors don't have to worry about Vipers.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, even if prior to the disruptors getting a shot or not, if the Roach count was just a little bit lower, then also the Stalkers, maybe even by their lonesome, have a chance to cause that snowball. If, you know, the Zerg player was supply blocked for 10 seconds at some point, or if they're a larva blocked for 10 seconds at one point. But Serral was not, timed out the Vipers well enough, was able to handle that as long as necessary to really collect himself and get the win on that front. And then it was just about making sure to kind of cover your bases, cross your T's, dot your I's type situation, which he did. And then there is the tightening of the noose once lurkers are out. So the Protoss player, if they don't, basically have Sky Toss. I know Disruptors sometimes can play a little bit against it, but not with Vipers out. If you're not Sky Toss, you kind of just tie to lurkers unless there's some weird base trade happening or something.
Yeah, you need that or probably some miracle feedbacks on Vipers or something.
Yeah.
And that is, even then, it's going to be extremely difficult and probably not the most reliable way. It's more of a time buying measure than anything else. But that is going to be a tied up series now, 1-1. Both these players winning kind of those mid or late game situations in very, very different style games. And I'm very curious to see where game number 3 is going to be taking us, as we are going to be moving into Cosmic Sapphire. We're going to be starting down here on the bottom right-hand side of the map. Top of the red, Protoss player from Alpha X. He is Zoun.
In the top left for Team Ents, he is the blue Zerg, Serral.
Great series so far with some nice macro games, some games that are going, you know, beyond kind of the earlier stages and stuff. We haven't seen a crazy number of shenanigans, but I would say that last game, Zombie Grub, that kind of fast disruptor drop and kind of follow-up push and everything, that is something that you really throw out once in a best of 5, right?
I would say so. I would say so. There is that chance that he kind of chooses the other option. There was the fork in the road kind of thing where he had the double target. You know what? Never mind.
Yeah.
He could maybe try and do that, but I don't know if it's really the most ideal way to play because I think that option still relies on it being a bit of a bamboozle, and it just, I don't know, it gets less bamboozly the more that you start with the main tree trunk that you do, which is a robo opener. We're moving on to Cosmic Sapphire as well, which I just really don't think facilitates any of these robo openers either. Not that it's that difficult to get across the map quickly if you do have a Warp Prism to ferry the Disruptors, if you do have a Warp Prism to warp in instantaneously. But it still is a bit of a difference in terms of that momentum build and the crunch time that the Zerg feels, as well as the way that the actual bases are set up, as far as abusing some of those chokes. The last map was really beautiful for what Zoun wanted to do, kind of bring up the aggression to a 10 very quickly, before Serral was ready and then abused the choke on that base. He was so close to doing so, unable to. Now we move into a very large map with a very different base setup. I'm thinking super late game again.
You know what? I could definitely feel that. And because I wouldn't doubt if we end up heading in that direction, we do have a few minutes before these kind of builders get kicked off. I do want to actually talk about some of the other bracket updates, because we have had B and C and D streams covering all sorts of things. If you're live at the venue, I hope you have your phones pull up that multi-stream so you can see all the other games that are happening, or if you're at home, it's a little bit easier to do it. But I want to note, actually, Bunny taking a 3-0 versus Clem.
Wow.
That means that Bunny advanced on to the round of 8. Nightmare taking a 3-2, reversing the series versus Scarlet. Scarlet was originally up 2-0 and then dropped the following 3 maps. So Nightmare advanced on. Ragnarok defeating Hero Marine 3-0. And currently, as far as I'm aware, Hero is actually up 2-0 versus a Laser. That is actually a magnificent showing for Korean Zombie Grub. In fact, if somehow Zoun is able to take this series versus Serral now, as the series is already tied up 1-1. He's clearly able to take at least a map off of Serral. We could actually have only one non-Korean in the round of 8.
Yeah, because 2 non
Because Showtime plays Estrella, that's guaranteed.
Yeah, that is interesting. That is one of the things that I was kind of hopeful for, honestly, I guess to show my bias, was that we would get the revenge for Valencia. Not necessarily because I'm biased because North America, but just because it would be kind of interesting, right? Valencia ended up being a 50-50 split, non-Koreans versus Koreans, and then all the Koreans won. So it was like, oh, okay, never mind. But I was hoping that this would be a little bit of that reversal. It'd be quite cool, but it's already been shown here with the top half of the results. And this one's still in play, of course, that no, the Koreans are reestablishing their dominance for theoretically the entire year. See what happens at Katowice.
Could very well. This is going to be an important tournament and an important match, I would say, for the non-Korean hopefuls, as Serral is definitely one of the players you look for to kind of represent that flag, no matter what is going on, no matter what else happens in a bracket. Serral is one of those players that a lot of the non-Korean fans are really cheering on for. But this has already been kind of fun and interesting little opening here for Zoun, as it did open up not just with the Oracle, but also got up that good old safety Void Ray that we see Protoss players occasionally revert back to.
Safety and vision denial, right?
Yeah.
You could do the same thing with the Phoenix as far as killing Overlords, but the Overlord, or the Void Ray does kind of overlap defense and offense, or harassment, whatever you want to call that. But yeah, taking out the vision, that's what I really want to focus on. Going into Twilight Council and Robo directly afterwards, I mean, it's pretty quick, but it is going to keep Serral maybe a little bit more in the dark. I don't think it's still scary enough to be really frightened about something immediate, but right now Serral is just trying to get to the lay of the land, determine exactly what is the plan while he settles on kind of an expected opener for the Zerg at this point at faster +1 melee, but still getting the roaches. It's going to be very, very quick Templar Archives.
Yeah, I have a feeling that we're getting into something that not necessarily is the biggest committal just yet from Zoun, but it is going to be the most aggressive opening he's gone for thus far.
Well, yeah, if Disruptors kind of are literally hit or miss. I mean, well, I guess maybe you could argue which one is the more aggressive. But
that's fair.
Yeah, okay, all right. Really just going forward with the Templar Archives as fast as he did. It was a surprising thing. Ultimately, it kind of boils down to the Charge Archon play, right? But even a very fast Warp Prism. I mean, the Serral... Oh, he's not going to see the Archons at this point. There you go.
Yep. Oh, forces a cancel over there, as the High Templars were going to be in a bit of danger, and forces another cancel over there. That is going to be really annoying. I do believe you get all the resources back for that when the Warp Prism cancels, but it's still annoying.
Yeah, very fast 6 gases. Double Archon dropped, a little bit of pressure, a little bit of scouting done with that as well. And then into, of course, a lot of those charge lots, probably quick Storm. And then into the late game, I suppose, we go. Because I don't think he's necessarily planning on doing a huge attack with charge lots warping in. I mean, Serral has to be kind of wary of that. You don't want to be too greedy against someone fearing on Archons with the Warp Prism that could warp in, theoretically, 8 Zealots right in your face. But currently just on the 4 gateways with 2 more finishing up, a few more finishing up. And the Archons are looking for that chip damage. So far, I mean, they've done something.
Yeah. I mean, I think we are beyond that point in the meta where Archons went from doing loads of damage in the early stages of PvZ to Zerg players took 0 damage to Archons and was surprised they didn't get anything. I feel like we've kind of returned back to, yeah, you know what, Archons can get a killer 2 here or there.
Yeah. It's very important that you don't lose them, of course.
That is a vital aspect of this build. You are up a creek without a paddle if you lose that either Archon or the Warp Prism, God forbid.
Yeah, so this is looking very similar to that first game. I mean, I called it with a macro game, a little bit faster on the Archons, right, to do this little bit of drop, but then not super quickly into Storm, but rather into the Robotics Bay once again. Gonna round out his army with those Disruptors, and Serral opts again for the fast Hive, adds in the Spire potential. I mean, he's not going to focus as much on the mid-game army aggression as he did in the first game. So his Broodlords, you know, they did eventually get to come out. He did handle the counter of Archon Zealot, so we got to that super late game. This one, it really is just into the super late game. Raider Spire starting as soon as the Hive is done is certainly within the realm of possibility. You want to keep out an eye for Zoun's push, just to take it seriously, just to actually have army, but considering they both really, I mean, directed themselves to the late game, I think they both understand that. So that's what they're shooting for. Who's going to get there in a little bit of a better place?
Yeah. Serral just going to be opening up the avenues for his own army to maneuver around on his own side of the map. But with that Spire and the Hive finishing up before there's really any kind of signs of Zoun doing a significant push out, he should feel pretty comfortable saying, all right, I'm getting to my late game exactly the way I wanted to. I have the ability to start getting up the additional forms of tech and everything, and I don't have to worry about flooding out a ton of units just to make sure I can defend against a big push in right now.
I guess they both really have to still keep in mind potential army swell, but it seems they're both doing a great job scouting. They're both actually keeping tabs on that through whatever way it is of their respective races. And then going into the late game, Zoun, you know, he's not too eager to going into the mass Stargate, so as much as I'm saying, like, prepare again for the super late game, that's not here yet. So he's still going to have a maxed out ground Protoss army push that Serral will definitely have to be mindful of. He has not chosen to go right into that Greater Spire, just has it now to play around with later. So we're not actually there super late game, but it's 9 minutes. Not much has happened, and both of them are accelerating towards a late game. So much so that I am a little surprised that Zoun is choosing to go into Blink right now instead of extra Stargates.
Yeah, gonna be adding on Blink. Hasn't quite gone into Storm or anything just yet. Warp Prism gonna immediately get recalled over there. Yeah. Is gonna be able to salvage that from a very awkward situation. You know, there is a very fun, it's a very precise timing, but you can actually abduct a Warp Prism at a very odd time, and it will sometimes pull it from the recall.
Oh yeah, yeah, I think I have seen that.
Yeah, very difficult to time though.
Yeah, that's something you're gonna be relying on game plan wise.
Yeah.
So yes, Serral with the Greater Spire already halfway done. Again, a situation where he's gonna have to get rid of some of his army to invest into those Broodlords. Sure. And Zoun has gone into one of the most perfect ground armies possible for Protoss. Lots of Archons, buffered by whatever miscellaneous units kind of need, as well as Disruptors. And the Banelings choosing to opt for initial wave that once again hits the heart of the army pretty well, and Zoun's Archon Ball already looking a little less intimidating. Zoun just pulls away.
Yeah, but I actually still like that for Zoun because he doesn't really end up losing any of the Archons. Okay, now he's going to start losing maybe some of these Archons. The Disruptors come in to reinforce. If you can keep those Archons alive, I mean, they'll regenerate the hit points in exchange for a lot of Banelings there, but I like this little Zealot run by, even just drawing a bunch of the attention up here over to the north side for Serral, and allows him to move safely to the south side without fear of a counterattack for a bit.
I'm kind of surprised at how easy Zoun's almost maxed out Protoss army, just got pushed away there. It's just like, oh, never mind. I didn't do that. You didn't see anything. Don't worry about it.
It's a little scary, especially when the Disruptors were not quite there, like full number and full force.
Again, I think it just had to do with not being the one to really choose when the battle started. It was kind of like, oh, he's here already, and that doesn't really bode well. The Disruptors didn't get to do their great hits or even that space buying that you were talking about for the last game. They didn't really get to do any of that. But that's worrying because Zoun is, again, delaying the Stargate, delaying that fleet beacon. He wanted to do maybe, I think, a more severe push that was scarier or at least lasted longer. But then Serral kind of got rid of it almost as fast as possible, not even really on his side of the map, so he knew he was really safe to do whatever he wanted, which, of course, eyes were set onto the Broodlords, which now he's up to. And if Zoun wants to combat Broodlords, either he's got to start being very mobile, or he's going to have to get into, again, his own fleet beacon, which he is currently getting into. Now it's a matter of going exchanging army for a different type of army.
Yeah, there's going to be a scary window here, exactly to your point, where Serral is going to have these Broodlords out on the map, and he should have total dominance in any kind of direct army-on-army engagement. It's going to be very difficult for Zoun to compete with, but he still does have a lot of ground units over here that are quite powerful, and the Broodlords are not exactly fully out in massive numbers. A handful of them are still trying to reinforce right now, but as those Broodlings start to crawl up in numbers, even the Archons are going to have a hard time contending with them, and Zoun has to back up. I like that he was going for the Zealot counterattack, but Serral is on top of it. He pushes that back as well, and he has full control here.
8 Broodlords was kind of just enough to make sure that the Archons couldn't literally like move their way through, just kind of physically push until they were really on top of the hatchery, even maybe under the Broodlords, and that's already too many to do that. So when it's too many to do that, either you're going to try and blink under them, which is exactly what happens, but then there's other things to worry about, or you're going to try and buy that time to the Tempest, which are on their way, but of course coming from all the way back home on the very far right side of the map, it's going to take a little while. And Zoun is already on the ropes. He might just have to give up the gold base, at least for now. Fight again in a later day.
Yeah, that is going to be very awkward. Is there any anti-air in Serral's army right now? Can he do anything to push back the Tempest?
He currently not. 3 Queens and 3 Vipers. Does that count?
Yeah, you know, the Viper's going to Parasitic Bomb and eventually kill the Tempest, but he will still be able to take out the gold. I think it just may be difficult for him to push too much further, and he probably doesn't want to, especially with Broodlords moving quite as slow as they do. He's going to need some space to retreat. Yes,
and I mean, Zoun chose the correct path there. I don't think there was really a necessity in trying to keep that gold base alive. It just would have been an inaccurate read of the game if he stubbornly stayed there and said, no, I can't lose this base. He could, and he can move somewhere else, again, try and buy that time while developing his own very real, very late game army of currently Tempests, and then later on we'll see what he adds in. And that also means that Serral can, I guess, kind of do the equivalent, adding in at least a few Corruptors, but since he hasn't gotten rid of any of his drones, he can only get so much of that army out.
That is certainly something he's going to have to be considering as we start moving later and later into the later stages of the game. Bane's going to come swarming on forward, going after a lot of these buildings. Probes already on evacuation notice, and I like that he's not using any of the Banelings to kill off that Nexus. The Lings are going to be more than enough to finish that off. Tempest count pretty much been revealed there for Serral, so he knows exactly what he's up against, but I love that Zoun is so good about ensuring he's never just defending, he's always defending with a counterattack on the north side, or he's attacking the south side with a counterattack on the north.
Yeah, he's been very good about that, and while it hasn't really been super successful so far, it feels like it is a matter of time. Eventually, Serral is going to be taking too much attention away from the defense, basically, whatever happens elsewhere, and is going to slip. But currently, not so much. And right now, Serral is mining a fair bit more. Certainly still has a very scary army, but Zoun has finally found him completely out of position, which looks like Serral was more than willing to admit. He's like, yep, you got me. Pull the drones, move away, and make sure I don't lose anything else besides this.
Yeah, and I actually love that these Zealots, even that were ready to move on the north side, just diverted around and were like, we'll just go clean up creep. Looks like you're pretty well defended there, but Serral finding an opportunity where Zoun is not necessarily as well defended. Oh man, leaves the Banelings there, kills off any of those high value units that might just be a little bit more vulnerable, like High Templar.
I love that you could kind of see the second where he just immediately pulled back and went,
no,
wait.
No.
I could kill a lot of things that are recalling back. Absolutely. So nice trade on the Banelings right there. And once again, all of those upgrades are on the way, although not as many air upgrades for Zoun as I think you would like. Currently just sitting at the 1-1, and that is 1 attack air and 1 shield, which covers everything. So just, I know he did get a second time in X-Core, and he has the resources.
Yeah, those weapon upgrades, for those who don't know, really heavily impact those carriers, and it's actually especially important if you're up against an army that has carapace upgrades. Those armor upgrades also really help against carriers, so every one of those weapon upgrades you can get out a little bit faster if you're adding on carriers and teching into late game Sky Toss is extremely important.
Yeah, there he goes. Okay, just a matter of time. So we're working on the 2-1 now. And late game it is. Late game it is, Fear Dragon. Our second one of this best of 5. What do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about how game 1 went, because we were talking a bit about that before, and just how, even though it looked like Serral was taking some good trades here and there and everything, I was still very impressed with how Zoun overall played the map and was able to patiently take little better and better trades and eventually turned it into a victory.
He did. We're going into a late game where, based on this best of 5, Serral is the one that I guess you would not predict to win it. But I guess as far as the back and forth, it is very different. Again, Serral did not opt to go into any of that super dedicated mid-game aggression, into the muta play that really was quite a failure in game number 1. So he set up into the late game quicker, and also I believe with more bank. So we're still 17 minutes in. That's not super long compared to the last 34-minute game, literally halfway. So that means that he might have a real bank to contest Zoun with, where the first game, that ended up being a potential problem. I think more so that final battle really was just very one-sided, but yeah, he is going to have more room to play with, literally on a map this size, as well as economy and bank on his side. Great fungal, pretty quick recall, but gonna lose some of those stalkers.
Yeah, loses 2 or 3 stalkers over there. I think the one thing that's going to be really fascinating about this map is because the gold base got taken relatively early, and it is going to be under attack yet again over here, but I don't know, if a few units come in to reinforce, I could still see maybe a holes coming in here. It doesn't look like he's going to have his main army heading all the way onto this location, but I feel like the gold base has been mined from a fair bit already. All the bases are going to be in the top right. These players are not necessarily going to have the same situation as Data C, where half of the bases that are fresh are on the bottom right and half the bases that are fresh are on the top left. It's going to be all the bases on the top right. It's going to come down a lot more to big army versus big army, I feel like.
Right. I mean, once the gold base is done, and it's really not, you know, it's been denied so many times, then it is going to move entirely up to the top right. There's going to be some battle threatening things like production and technology buildings, but yeah, it's going to go down to the top right, of which there is not that corner base, so it's not completely mirrored on this map. Nothing in the top right. As the top left, that's not going to be a kill on the Nexus. The mothership goes for a last-second cloak on it.
Mama looks after her babies. You end up seeing a nice little cloak come in to save it. Stalkers on the bottom left-hand side doing exactly those kind of little small counterattacks you were talking about. As this base still has a bit of mining left over, these Stalkers are going to be able to find a little bit of damage, and they just immediately right-click down the hatchery, not going to even bother going after the drones at this stage in the game.
No, which they're going to get it.
Yeah, and make it out with a handful of those Stalkers alive at least. Maybe not for long. I don't know if that was quite worth it, especially after you lose the Nexus over there. Oof.
Yeah, that's what really sucks here. Zoun, I think in the first game, had a couple of moments where he also had equivalent bank or even slightly bigger bank, but really for Zoun, it's been more of that typical ZVP story, which is that he has been almost broke, now really getting quite close to being broke as another base is under attack. I mean, the size of this map, the way that you have to go left to right in such an extreme manner compared to the first one, Daisy's also big, but kind of more like a linear path to each other as you expand. This one really is just like you both have your side of the map. Mobility is obviously going to be a factor in this game. So in this case, Serral able to really pull Zoun to the left, pull him to the right, pull him back to the left, and then in the process get kind of 2-for-1 deal on the Nexus.
Yeah, I really feel like that was actually a really bad 25 seconds there for Zoun, where loses a bunch of those Stalkers, loses the Nexus, loses an Oracle, loses a bunch of probes over at that bottom base. I actually think that that might trigger something over here, where he feels like he has to go do something. We see Fungal Growth coming out on a lot of the Skytoss army. There's the Viper Pole on the mothership. Time Warp does come down to try and zone back a bit of this army, but looks like Serral's okay with giving up a base because he's already sniped off and actually softened up quite a bit of the Skytoss army. A lot of the shields have already been taken off.
This was a much sadder way to play out the late game for Zoun. It is almost done already. An 80 supply difference. 30 in army supply. Something extreme would have to happen in this final battle, and that does not look to be the case for Zoun, as all of the storms are taken out of the equation. Parasitic bomb on all of the capital ships, severely injuring them, and the Corruptors trying to go to town. Now, there's not enough Corruptors to win right here, right now, possibly, but there will be more on the way, even if that wasn't the case. And Zoun knows this was it. This was his last army. So unless Serral is completely out of cash, he's still probably screwed. There you have it, 13 Corruptors on the way.
Yeah, and you can see that Zoun is just clinging to a little bit of hope over here that maybe, just maybe, Serral didn't have a massive bank behind him, but the Infestors, they are looking, they're going to go for those Zero Parasites on the Tempest. They do the extra damage to the carriers, right-clicking them down, even actually killing off the other Tempest. And as you see the Corruptors make their way forward, Zoun is going to face reality here. This tied-up series that was 1-1 is going to be going to a 2-1 lead for Serral.
Serral takes the lead, and that was perhaps because that was a more typical, yes, agree, late game to late game setup. I mean, really, with the comparison here, you can see just how much of an awkward transition Serral had to make in the first game, since he dedicated so much to some Muta play, as well as the big old Roach Baneling Ravager play, more so wanting to get damage done there and getting really nothing done. So it was, you know, kind of more on Zoun not being able to capitalize on momentum, and even let Serral play into a super, super late game, which never felt super comfortable for him. Here, yes, Zoun tried to make it uncomfortable, tried to hit him at points where he might still be a little too weak. He wasn't. because he was setting up, I think, just so much of that in preparation, pre-planning that, and then actually getting to it.
Yeah. Game number 1 and game number 3 may look somewhat similar on paper if you just describe it in a short phrase of went to the hyper late game very quickly, but they look radically different, and especially how Serral got there. And you can see how effectively he was able to take that one fight over there, sniping off so many of those those big tech units there for Zoun. And yeah, supply difference really showed itself very quickly.
You can kind of see how that would have gone south for Serral, though. Like, you could even argue that at the very second that we were just watching there, it was Serral showing a little bit of too much overconfidence. Because he dived in as if that was the moment where you're just like, GG, all the carriers and Tempest are dead. And instead, there was more Protoss left. And if a Zerg doesn't have a bank, they do go, wait, did I just die? Hold on here. But in that case, it wasn't quite severe enough. And if Zoun had a couple more units left over, or had, maybe more importantly, some of those storms to even begin with on that fight, maybe that could have been almost like the Cure situation earlier on, Cure DRG, right?
Yeah.
Basically dead, but the army's pretty good, so let's try this.
No, I'm definitely with you. It was surprising because if you also factor in that Zoun entered that fight where he had basically been down about 40 supply because he lost a bunch of those stalkers in the bottom left.
That's true.
And also he had been losing some of his other bases and stuff that otherwise potentially could have been mining, right? Because he had a snipe off with the Lings on his far right-hand base. The south base also had all the mining disrupted and everything, so he wasn't even building up enough of a bank to potentially reinforce. There were a lot of things that went wrong, even just a little bit before that. So despite that, he still ended up winning that fight. In the end, yeah, it wasn't the best trade, but it was still could have been something.
It could have been, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
And now he finds himself down a game on his last life for DreamHack Atlanta. In the top right of Stargazers, he is Zoun.
And up here in the top left-hand side of the map, we have the blue Zerg player, one of 3 remaining non-Koreans left in the tournament. He is ENCE Esports' Serral. I do want to confirm, by the way, that is correct. One of 3 remaining, as Hero did end up defeating a laser 3-0, advanced on to the round of 8. Is going to face off versus one of the other non-Koreans of either Showtime or Estrella, which I believe is going to be the series we'll be checking out after this.
That is exciting, yes. We're looking forward to that PvP and the one beyond it as well. Excellent. All right, so it could very well be the case that we are saying that Serral is the foreign hope, bringing that phrase back. And all the people who don't watch StarCraft are like, what a foreign I mean?
It's 2018 again, Zombie
Yeah, 2018 was great.
Koreans dominating the scene.
It was so much more hopeful back then. No, but it's one of those things that we keep on preparing for it to eventually stop being so dominated by the Koreans, to have more than one non-Korean hope in the round of 8 or round of 4. And it just has not yet to get there quite. Valencia was kind of our closest, and then all the Koreans won. But yeah, Serral still looking strong. Not as dominant as we were expecting in this particular matchup. Zoun really is showing his class here under all this pressure against one of the world's best in a matchup that he's usually very good at, very few falterings, and still able to go a lot of the times toe-to-toe. First game, absolutely, which he took, but second game, also very close. Third game, a little less so, but then again, you got to give credit to that last battle. If things had gotten slightly worse for Serral, or slightly better for Zoun, we could have had a very hype, kind of comeback moment there.
I'm really interested in knowing what is happening in Zoun's mind right now. What is he thinking? Stargazers is not a normal map. It is not a data C. It is not going to be one of those maps where you just kind of sit back and fully macro up and nothing's going to go out of the ordinary. Everything's super normal and standard. This is definitely one of those maps that can be a little bit stranger sometimes. Although I'm curious what your thoughts are on PvZ specifically, because I think of this map in a lot of the other matchups as being strange, but PvZ can be a little different sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. For this one, I'm thinking right down the middle.
Right down the middle. So you're thinking straight down the middle in terms of dividing up the map?
Yeah. Serral's going to take 5 bases. Zoun's going to take 5 bases. They're going to just meet in the middle sometimes. Maybe around the star. Maybe hang around the gold base. Maybe the Zelnaga. Whichever one seems most appealing. But I think it's less to do with the map necessarily as it is Zoun, who might be feeling even more of the pressure than perhaps he started the series out with, to be a little wonky, to throw in a few more curveballs and hope that the actual execution of them works out, because Game 2 was a bit of a curveball. Just the execution was just shy of really working.
Yeah, especially as we were talking about before, that game number 2, the timing of it really, really making a big, big difference there. So maybe a potential for him to change things up just a little bit more. Good old Void Ray, that is not only the safety Void Ray Zombie was talking about, but also the Overlord denying Void Ray. Going to be able to snipe off one of those Overlord supply blocks Serral a little bit, but that also is a bit of information for Serral as well. Already starts up those Spore Crawlers, and we're going to get into good old standard PvZ. You
would have to assume that Zoun is going to do something different after this. Like, that's what I would assume. Again, kind of going from the perspective of, yes, Zoun has been going into some very good macro games against the guy. Denial of Vision is a golden opportunity to try and do something a little bit different. I don't mean something super extreme, because Zoun is grabbing a third Nexus, so it's not 2-base all-in or something like that. But just a little bit different, right? So last time he opted for the Archon drop, which didn't end up doing a whole lot. I don't think Serral ever felt really threatened by any potential there. And then the first game, I think he just omitted the Archon drop, right? And still was ultimately into super late game. So this time around, Twilight Council Forge, okay, I mean, pretty normal, actually. But maybe more of like a 3-base Blink aggression, trying to take control. Maybe a bit more of like even a charge Archon attack, like truly and deliberately, this is all in, this is, well, kind of effectively all in 3 bases. Or is he really just going to shoot up to the late game? Almost like a, yeah, I have to kind of go into this Twilight Council Forge thing, but I believe we're going to go into 30, 40 minutes once again.
Yeah, I think whatever we see the decision coming out from Zoun, I think it's going to be very telling if this ends up going to a Game 5, that Zoun will pretty much be sticking to his guns again with going to the Hyper Late game if he decides to go for it yet again in this game. We do see 4 more gateways being added on, but I mean, this is, again, Stargazers, the 3 bases already established. This is the freebie 3-base map that you just guaranteed pretty much get that in this matchup.
It's been a while since the first game, but I'm pretty sure this is pretty much what it looked like, right?
Yeah, pretty similar.
That third one was just kind of different with the fast Robo and Templar Archives together, but I really don't think it was threatening. I think the most threatening thing about it was that it could have maybe come with those 8, 10 gateways, whatever was Zealots.
Yeah. The only difference I can spot so far from what I recall is that I think he made a Void Ray this game. And I don't think he made it in the first game.
Yeah,
maybe, but that's pretty much it. It's the fast Templar Archives, the charge, and +1 weapons coming on out. And Serral does get his Overlord in and gets a little bit more scouting information there, might have a better idea of what's happening. He already throws down his Infestation Pit. He is also getting ready, likely to start moving toward his own hive.
Right. Yeah, which Serral has been able to basically get away with. I mean, if that is his choice, that is what he's gotten away with. It was the first game where he decided to go more so on the mid-game, mid-technology aggression. So I assume this is what he's going to get away with this time. Oh, okay. Oh, finally, someone changes it. Nice. Serral is going to go into Swarm Host and Nidus. So he's going to be the one applying that aggression, not in the way that it might be more typical. Again, the Roach Ravager, maybe some Muta shenanigans. No. Something completely different, which I absolutely love. Zoun is even going to be thinking of this as a possibility. Certainly searching, but probably more so with the idea of seeing either an Infestation Pit for Hive, as a couple of the previous games, or that Spire. Not necessarily the Swarm Hosts. I just checked the Revelation. He did not see the Swarm Host pop out.
Yeah, I think
there he goes.
Okay, that's going to be an important scout there, because you really do need to know what you're up against over here so that you can position your units appropriately. Having your units a lot more aggressively out of the map is a huge boon when you're up against this sort of style, and having him out of the map is actually an understatement right now for Zoun, because he is not just out of the map, he's on Serral's side of the map right now.
Well, Serral might have to give up this base. That's exactly what he decides to do. Gives up the base, waits until he has more roaches readily available, and perhaps even brings home the Swarm Host. The Nidus Swarm, no, they are definitely attacking on the other side of the map. Going into that natural, we have ourselves almost a base trade. If the Locusts target the Nexus, which there you go, it will be effectively 1-for-1. Oh. There you have it. And Serral now taking a dominant supply lead, because I think he cared less about losing the base that he lost.
Yeah, that is going to be a harsh blow there for Zoun. I think he also has stalled out an upgrade on the Twilight Council. I'm not sure what that quite was, but we're going to see that the Archons are able to try and fight against the Roaches for a little bit, but it's not a fight they want to take. Zealot's trying to cause some chaos over in the main base, but the Roaches are going to go uncontested. The third is the rest of Zoun's army is just on a full-on, all-out retreat.
Yeah, this is looking like it's already game over, to be honest. sometimes the supplies really are quite inflated, roaches and swarm hosts, but Zoun, I think he was just completely blindsided, even though he got basically a 5-10 second notice of a swarm host. It was literally one swarm host passing a choke. Like, I don't even know if he was paying attention, so just didn't realize what the situation would be. Probably would have been better for him to retreat, to take care of the Locust first, get settled on those 4 bases, and then we're talking about a very long game. But Serral going in for the 1-2 punch that was just so much more dramatic than Zoun's punch on his 4th base.
Yeah, Zoun not able to deal with those swarm hosts in conjunction with his own attack, and it really ended up costing him. He's now down quite a bit of supply, which again, like you were saying, Zombie Grub Swarm is going to be inflated supply, but I feel like in this case, it's actually going to just be the fact that Serral has enough army to deal with the ground army of Zoun without the swarm hosts. And the swarm hosts are still free to do their counter damage without even necessarily needing to aid these roaches. As we already see, the Zealots, the Stalkers getting cleaned up. Serral takes the 3-1 victory.